I think that most people consider video games fun.
I stand corrected.
While some games can create stress to aid the gameplay, most of those games end up being horror games. Not to say that other games aren't stressful, but very few games use that stress to aid the message or experience of the game, with it instead being a byproduct of it. I'm not exactly sitting at the edge of my seat in the Mushroom Kingdom. Some people just like to clock out of their minimum wage job and come home and boot up a game to relax. Then what the fuck is this shit? There's a somewhat recent phenomenon in games of just putting you in a minimum wage job. Rather than filling out a job application, a very sizable amount of gamers flock to these games to get that true experience of customer service.
You know, one of the best parts about video games is being able to experience fantastical things you'd never be able to experience in real life, like working at a gas station or being Italian. However, without a doubt, one of the most acclaimed games to fit into this category is a little game by the title of
Inspired by the developer's awful experiences with border checkpoints, you are put in the place of an immigrant inspector. The entirety of the game takes place on this tiny desk, and the gameplay is as follows. A person walks up to you and hands you their paperwork. It is your job to make sure there's no fishy business going on by reading their paperwork, and that's it. Just reading paperwork. At first I didn't get the appeal of the game. Most of these job simulator type games usually have some sort of draw to them. Power Wash Simulator tries to replicate the satisfying feeling of watching someone else pressure wash something. The game Job Simulator is a comedic sketch game that uses the job you're put in as a backdrop for the interactive jokes. Happy's Humble Burger Barn is bad, but Papers, Please is quite literally just paperwork. It has been somewhat gamified. You get $5 for every person you successfully check, and you get docked money for everyone you fail at. And that's important because unlike the average player, you have a loving family. Rent's due, and if you're not playing it well, you become the average player. Alone. This is a great incentive for making you play well, and the game is constantly making you aware of how slow you're being. Your family members aren't really characters, but the game pulls off caring about them well. Papers, Please is very matter-of-fact. There's no quirky dialogue teaching you how to keep your family alive, or any tips and tricks on how to do well in the game. Your entire life is your work, and because of that, you don't get to spend any time with your family. It gives your character a reason to be at this shitty job, and it gives you, the player, a reason to do well at the game. In fact, the entire game has this sort of brutalist aesthetic to it that makes everything feel restrictive. The art style in this game is really interesting. Everything is super blocky, and it's definitely supposed to be reminiscent of an old Cold War propaganda poster. Since the game is set in the fictional communist state of Arstotzka, this is definitely an intentional decision. This sort of visual flair actually helps make everything super readable and helps the game stand out. Another thing that definitely helps that is how the humans look in this game. Everybody just looks gross! And I love that! People look gross. You look gross. I look gross.
Yes, I do read the comments.
So many games are too afraid to make their characters look real, and with a game that's supposed to make you get invested in every character's micro-story, it was definitely a good decision. I love how every character is monochromatic with these harsh shadows. It's just vague enough that it lets your brain do a lot of the heavy lifting for how you're supposed to interpret these. It makes the game feel both alien and restrictive, while giving it just enough wiggle room for you to really see the people in it. The restrictiveness transfers over to the gameplay side of things too. There are two aspects to keep note of: the paperwork and the person who handed it to you. While the game starts with relatively simple paperwork, as the game progresses, the amount of documents and tasks that you have to keep track of just keeps growing and growing. When you have 6 different pieces of paper on your desk, it's so easy to miss an incorrect date or a slightly different name. On top of that, the game tries to make you give a shit about the people too. The game has a pretty good sense of humor. It understands that if you were just sitting in a cubicle all day long talking to a bunch of people who don't know what they're talking about, then it wouldn't be fun. It would be my day job. Most of the characters have interesting things to say, like hello or piss off, but in between you trying to make rent, there are a few wacky characters that'll show up and make you think about what you're doing past a routine inspection. I won't spoil everything, but from time to time these freedom fighter cultist types show up and try to get you to help them out with getting rid of the border wall. This goes from passing notes in class to political assassination.
Ugh, not again.
Sometimes the people at the desk will try and barter with you or convince you to let someone else through. This is a really fun way of the game testing you, seeing how far you're willing to go to get your heat bill paid. It makes you evaluate your own morals at every turn. After all, every person you turn away is just that. A person. You have to ask yourself, what's more important? That this woman gets out of a sex trafficking ring even though she had bad documentation? Or getting your son a Nintendo Switch? Everything in the game is there to overwhelm you and stress you out.
And then it just clicked for me. The game isn't supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be stressful.
You aren't supposed to play this like other job simulation games. You're supposed to be thinking about what you would really be doing in this scenario. The paperwork isn't overly complicated because it wants you to have fun sorting through it all. It's complicated as a form of commentary on immigration and the bizarre ways that legality is used to keep people out. You don't have to navigate a person at the border trying to escape from an abusive system because you like doing it. You do it so that you can ask yourself if you're doing the right thing. You don't murder someone because it's a good bit. You do it because someone in a cool robe told you to do it. This game is one of the best I've seen that grapples with morality in the player. It's not just a good option and a bad option. It's you, the human in front of the screen, deciding someone's fate, and if they're deserving to pass by.
There's a reason that Papers, Please gets brought up in the conversation of if video games are art or not, and I'm telling you it's not because of the music. It forces you, the player, to take a step back and reevaluate your own ideas, thoughts that you may have never thought of before. It's a truly fantastic game, and for that, it goes above Celeste 64. Now go fill out a job application!